So, traditional Jewish, Christian, or Muslim. To understand.
Atheist and agnostic as well as many types.
Trick or treat.
What's the appropriate response to that?
Get off my porch.
Besides just silently handing a child candy and walking away. It's like a knock-knock joke, but you know what you're supposed to say after.
Right.
Anyway. Trick or treat, we're in the depths of Spooktober. What are we talking about today?
We're talking about trickster gods. One of these days, we're actually going to do an episode about the legacy that built up what we have as modern Halloween, but not this year.
We actually haven't said Holy Watermelon Podcast yet. So welcome to all our listeners today. We're so excited to do trickster gods. I couldn't have told you what a trickster god was before doing this episode. I could have only said Loki is a trickster god.
Okay. Well.
So I learned lots.
I'm glad.
So let's start there with what the heck is a trickster god. Hyde, an imagination and creativity scholar, says that tricksters are boundary crossers, breaking societal norms and disrupting things. Basically, a shit disturber.
Yeah, that's a pretty great summary.
Because
episode done.
Done. Because I was reading about some of these gods and I was like, it says they're a trickster god, but then like that's kind of it. And so you have to read between the lines about what attributes actually makes them a trickster. Which is where I did a whole bunch of research on specific gods and I was like, I don't get this. So I went back.
A bunch of the trickster gods that we're going to talk about, and broadly trickster gods in general, they aren't objects of worship so very often. It does happen, but it's not normal because trickster gods by their nature aren't trustworthy, which means you wouldn't pray to them so much as pray to somebody else to keep them away.
Yeah, they're in polytheistic religions. They're this antagonist that often can be used to, not always, but can be used to describe the bad things that happen.
Yeah.
Kind of like chaos monsters, right?
Yeah, in some cultures, they take on a new popularity in folk tales and whatnot. And they're always great for stories. They're just not great for worship. They're clever, they're cunning, and sometimes they're foolish. They're almost always keepers of secret knowledge, even the foolish ones. I think that's kind of fun. They're rude to authority. One of the great stories of Loki that's really popular that I don't think is really that exciting of a story is just him roasting literally everybody at a feast until Thor comes in and says, no, this is over now. You're terrible.
You're the worst. Yeah, that happens a lot. Yeah. Mocking authority figures is a big thing.
Yeah. Sometimes they're shapeshifters, like Anansi. Is almost always a spider, but sometimes not. We'll talk more about him later. We've talked about Loki, I feel like, a lot through the course of this series. He's fun, plus, popular pop culture figure.
There's a lot of info on Loki, too, which is nice.
Yeah. And we'll say it again. Marvel is not a credible source for the mythology around this character. But, yeah, he's all about that shapeshifter. We've talked about the one time he turned into a horse. That was nuts.
A female horse.
Yes.
To carry a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. So lots of shape-shifting, gender bending, disguises. Those are also common with trickster gods.
Yeah.
These gods blur the lines between what is right and wrong, and they're often used to teach moral lessons in whatever religion they are. They're not necessarily inherently evil, but they do bad things.
Well, is doing bad things evil?
I mean,
evil is a tricky thing to define.
That's true, yes.
But yeah, they tend to be defined by the chaos that surrounds them. Not that they're the same thing as chaos monsters, but they're dicks.
Yeah. Selfish is also a really great way to describe them. So acting in their own self-interest. They don't care about the humans or the other gods in their pantheon. They just want what's theirs.
Yeah. And sometimes what belongs to other people.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I thought you meant generosity. No, you mean stealing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it's nice to have what somebody else has.
Someone else has. Fair.
Loki's a fun example. Out of dozens of trickster gods, it's a good example I think we can start with even.
Sure, I'll just say there's dozens and dozens of trickster gods across the globe.
Most polytheistic traditions have one or two.
So we're not going to cover them all.
No.
We've
can't
selected a
handle that.
handful kind of at random
Yeah, pretty
to
much.
go into detail and talk about. So I'll let Preston start with Loki.
All right. So if you know Loki from Marvel only, some of this is not going to be very congruent with what you are familiar with. That's okay. So Loki is the son of Farbauti and Laufey. Laufey is his mother, and she may or may not have been a giant. Some sources suggest that she may have been a goddess, whereas Farbauti was a giant, one of the Jotnar. Marvel combines these two figures, giving the mother's name to the father. It doesn't confuse anybody.
I mean, Loki's already confusing.
It's weird that in the old sources, Loki is referred to as Laufey's son, and traditionally you would refer to somebody by their father's name. But the old texts are very clear that Laufey is the mother's name. So there's something that's a little countercultural about the Jotnar, which plays into Loki being a trickster.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I like it too. Marvel also seriously butchers the arrangement of the family tree. Loki has a wife named Sigyn, and she is a goddess of some kind. I couldn't find anywhere any clear statement of her being a Vanir or an Aesir. Together they had two sons, Narfi and Vali, but as we've talked about in our last episode, Loki does have another lover, the giant Angerboda. So at least Loki did find somebody of his own race, as well as this goddess. But they don't have normal children at all.
Oh, no.
There's Jormungandr and Fenrir. And there's Hel. Hel is normal-ish. I mean, necrotic, but she's fine other than that.
Yeah, happens to the best of us.
And then Fenrir the wolf and Jormungandr the giant snake monster. No big deal.
That's weird.
And like we had mentioned before, bonus of being a shapeshifter, you can have sex with the stallion. There's a story that is important, kind of, that Loki had to distract the stallion Svadilfari from his work. And so the best way to do that is present a sweet piece of ass. And instead of going to find another horse, Loki's like, I gotta distract him now. I guess it's gonna be my own ass.
I'm just imagining doing like a sexy horse dance.
Right? Walking backwards.
Yeah,
towards...
just a real like exaggerated saunter.
Well, anyway, Svadilfari knocked Loki up. And that's how we get Sleipnir, Odin's eight-legged horse. Because if it's not Sigyn, those babies are coming out bad. Yeah, all kinds of great fun. Being a trickster can be fun, I guess. Good old archaeological research. Nobody has found any ancient devotional statuettes of Loki. And most scholars are like, well, obviously... because you would pray to Odin to keep Loki away. Because he's a troublemaker. He ruins your plans. He's connected with all kinds of bad stuff. So just keep that fellow away. Loki isn't technically a god, even though we usually call him a trickster god, the god of mischief, whatever. But he is a sworn brother of Odin. Sometimes they call them blood brothers. It just means they share blood, but that they have shared blood. Yeah. They
You lost me. Okay. I just gave Preston together. A look that showed I did not comprehend.
They're not genetic siblings.
Okay.
But they have sworn a blood oath together. That's the way to phrase that.
Oh, thank you.
So, not the adopted son of Odin, not the adopted brother of Thor, but the sworn blood brother of Odin.
Perfect.
So, Marvel screwed the whole thing up. It's terrible.
They paraphrased excessively.
I guess, yeah. To the point where you start saying things that aren't right.
Excessive paraphrasing and creative liberties.
Yeah. So all of the stories about Loki pretty much are of him spoiling the gods' plans or just being a dick to them. And he always makes things right, or accepts his punishment with at least some poise.
As we all should.
But there's always this moral that not even the Jotnar can escape the consequences of mischief. So don't be a dick.
Be a dick.
Yeah, because humans are certainly inferior to the Jotnar as far as might and power goes.
Absolutely. Our next trickster god is Momus from the Greek pantheon. He is the personification of satire, mockery, and also of ridicule and harsh criticism. So he is
Great
a dick.
role for a trickster.
Right? I found one article saying he's the god of trolling.
Yeah,
Which I
totally.
thought was great. Great way to put it. He was actually kicked out of Mount Olympus for constantly mocking the Olympians.
See, the Olympians have a lot less patience than the Asgardians. The Aesir just... They more or less took Loki's punishment, and then Thor is just like, okay, you need to stop now. These guys are like, no, we're getting rid of you. We don't want you on this mountain anymore.
Now, there are also versions of Momus that have softened him to a more harmless figure of fun. So more modern artwork, and I say modern artwork, still really old artwork when we were depicting Greek gods, but not nearly as old as the ancient Greeks, paint him as a jester.
Yeah, that's
so
fair.
quite literally a trickster, jokester.
Yeah.
Whatever. I'm going to interrupt this trickster god with a mini story. We have a couple stories today. This one's actually paraphrased from Aesop's Fables. So Zeus had created a bull, Prometheus a man, and Athena a house, and they selected Momus as the judge of their handiwork. Momus was jealous of their creations and began by saying that Zeus had made a mistake in not putting the bull's eyes on the ends of his horns so that he could see where he was striking. And he said that Prometheus was wrong in not hanging man's heart on the outside so that scoundrels could be detected and so that it would be evident what everyone had on his mind. Finally, he said that Athena should have put wheels on her house so that a man could easily move if he had a bad neighbor. Zeus lost his temper with Momus over this spitefulness and threw him out of Olympus.
Well, at least we've adopted Athena's ideas. We got loads of mobile
And
homes
loads
now.
of mobile homes. I've also seen one version also said that he told Prometheus that there should be a window as opposed to it being on the outside so you could look in and see. But
Okay.
anyways,
That couldn't go wrong at all.
just, I mean, having your heart on the outside, I'd rather have a window in than my heart hanging out
Yeah.
if I had to pick. But yeah, Momus, just a judgy bitch.
Yeah.
Oh, I love Kokopelli. Can I do Kokopelli too?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to talk about Kokopelli. Another trickster god. I need to figure
That's
out a
the
different.
theme of
That's
our
the theme of the episode. So Kokopelli is a deity in the Hopi First Nations indigenous tribe in southwest United States. This is primarily in Arizona. So Kokopelli is a fertility deity, but also falls under the trickster umbrella. He's a master braider in the spirit of music. There's actually a really common depiction of Kokopelli playing a flute, a modernized version, because the original version actually just had him with a big old schlong because he's a fertility god.
And so we modified it and put the tip in his mouth.
No, he always had the tip in his mouth, but then he also had a penis.
Oh, okay.
He had his flute and a giant dick.
Okay.
We got rid of the
So
giant.
he's holding fewer things now.
He was never holding the dick. It was holding
It's
itself.
always erect,
Always erect.
like a champ.
Like, if you have an erection for more than 4 hours, please see your doctor. So the symbol of him without this wiener has become a really common symbol throughout the southwestern United States. We actually have a choir here called the Kokopelli Choir, and it is exactly that symbol, sans phallus. So
Nice.
he represents the playfulness of music and is represented as this minstrel figure. There is one story, so we haven't touched on indigenous religion yet, but often deities will cross-pollinate.
Sure.
So there's a story from the Winnebago tribes, not the Hopi tribe, that he would detach his penis.
This is traumatizing already.
He would detach his penis and then send it down the river to have sex with any innocent maidens that might be bathing in the river downstream. He'd just like, pew! And his penis would go and sentiently.
So this is a weird, alarming story already. But imagine the
thinking it's a fish and.
But like, what's better? Like having a fish slime its way up in there, or a water snake, or whatever. You got a lot of options here.
Eels, yeah.
Or a trickster god's wiener.
I mean,
what's worse?
I have follow-up questions that cannot be answered. So to make that determination, there's like a size and girth factor. Like you got to compare whatever river creature and the wiener.
Yeah.
And there's a rigidity factor.
Yes.
You need to know as well. So there's a few. Oh my goodness. I don't know how much of this is a trigger warning, X-rated episode. This is too late. We're too late.
But for real, there's definitely real world encounters that people have had, and this was the explanation they came up with.
I mean,
for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're ever traveling the Southwest United States, like I said, the symbol of Kokopelli is quite common. So enjoy that now.
And be careful in the rivers.
Be careful in the rivers, children.
All right. Let's move on. The Celts have a trickster god known as Lugh, Celtic god of mischief, as they call him. He's also a representation of kings, justice, and rulership, which is a little irregular. Kind of like when Loki pretended to be king for a little while.
Totally. This was the one where I had to go and look up what made a trickster god, because Lugh is like the top of the pantheon.
But he's a little chaotic.
But he's also a trickster god. So I was like,
energy.
Yeah, chaotic neutral, chaotic good, something.
Hard to say. I don't know.
I don't know enough about him.
He was known for being cunning. And that's where a lot of people just staple the trickster god label on because of that. Possession of hidden knowledge is also super important in this particular situation. But he was also a stealer, a thief.
There's a word for that, yeah.
And a liar and a cheat. And he would do whatever it takes to win. Which, I mean, you got to do what you got to do.
You got to do what you got to do.
Especially when, say, a Christian empire is rolling into your gates and just tearing stuff up.
Or the Fomorians.
Sure. All kinds of stuff needs to happen. So here we have a tricky king god.
Pretty cool. You can take Gwydion, too.
Right.
Do a couple Celtic ones.
I feel like we've talked about Gwydion recently. Or maybe...
Maybe you're just so into our research.
Maybe. Who knows? Anyway, Gwydion is Welsh. He's a magician and a trickster known for being witty, as one would expect. He's also compared to Merlin because of his magicalness. Merlin of the good old Arthur tales. Because Wales, close to England. He's not good. He's not evil. He will do all kinds of things. He can help you out in a time when you're in need sometimes. Especially if your needs might put somebody else in harm's way. Yeah, good and bad.
Yes, yeah, he has deeds that are doing that are really good, and then I read one about sexual assault. So,
of course,
also really bad.
Takes what he wants.
Takes what he wants when he wants it. So,
right, just like good old Kokopelli sending it down the river. He gets what he wants. And he can surprise you because he doesn't have to have his head out the water to breathe.
Get it. It's a wiener joke. Do the balls go with it?
That's a great question. Is he there for enjoyment or is he there to inseminate? It's all magic and
I was going to say, why not both?
Anyway.
Wow. Am I taking Sun Wukong? All right. So Sun Wukong is, or also known as the Monkey King, comes from Chinese culture and probably the Chinese native religion, Taoism. He is a very important character in Chinese culture, and he's been adapted often for television movies, including like Dragon Ball and like super common things. He was born from a rock.
Okay.
I included that because I thought it was a great detail.
That is a great detail.
So he has a lot of stories associated with him. And again, a lot of these have been adapted for television, film, and books and whatever. But one of the first tricks he played was actually escaping death. So Yan Wang and the 10 kings of hell came to collect the Monkey King's soul. However, he tricked Yan Wang and managed to get a hold of the Book of Life and Death. So the Monkey King erased his name from this book and put his soul beyond the reach of these kings of hell.
Fun.
So that was the first tricky. So immortal. Then he spent some time hanging out in the heavens, not like we think of it in like a Judeo-Christian dead heavens, but in the heavens, think of like Mount Olympus. And
The realm of the gods above.
the realm of the gods above. Thank you, Preston. And the Jade Emperor was so sick of his shit, he got kicked out.
Yeah, that
He
makes
spent
sense.
time mocking the Emperor and being critical. Yeah, and doing all sorts of trickster things like that. Just generally being a dick. And they were like, we've had enough of you.
I really like turning the monkey into the trickster god. It makes perfect sense that you would warn people, be careful around monkeys. They're just going to take your stuff and ruin your day.
Right. There was a great National Geographic show. I forget what it's called now. But yeah, like followed monkeys in Jaipur and they would like break into homes. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Just
I like
wild, chaotic energy.
binge watched on New Year's Day because that's what was on TV. It was a mad, wild day. I would
Sure.
like fall in and out of sleep and then watch these monkeys.
Nice.
Anyway.
So Eshu is a cool Yoruba African spirit. He is the deity of orderliness and law enforcement, which is really weird for a trickster god.
Right? But it all makes sense when you read more.
Yeah. Keep listening. He is the personification of mischief and teaches that there are always two sides to every story. You worry about the law, but you got a lot of freedom within that law, I guess.
Well, I think it's more of a like, you need to hear both sides before you make a judgment.
Absolutely.
Right? That's where the law enforcement
Yeah.
piece comes in.
So Eshu is necessary to an ordered life. This also makes sense from a law enforcement justice perspective. Eshu controls and regulates the extremes by balancing happiness and hopelessness, destruction and fulfillment, joy and sorrow. In the 1800s, the name Eshu was incorrectly translated as Satan, back when people were translating their records, because people are super racist and let's just make people from Africa look bad, I guess. People suck. Because he is kind of a devil's advocate, playing for that second side of the story.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I thought that was an interesting, kind of like Lugh, where you don't expect the god of law and order to be the trickster god. You don't expect the king god to be the trickster god.
Right.
Couple of interesting ones.
Yeah. We got some great diversity in these various pantheons.
Oh, is it a spectrum, Preston?
I don't know if this is a spectrum, but maybe.
Okay.
I guess if you were to chart things out, it would look pretty spectrumy.
Yeah.
My instinct was no, but that was a wrong instinct.
Oh. Preston learned something new today, too.
That's what this is all about. All right. And from another part of Africa, in West Africa, the Akan people have a pretty awesome, chaotic... Well, he's not that chaotic. Sort of crazy.
Wild.
Trickster.
Wild child.
He is a wild child. If you can picture Orlando Jones, that's what I do when I think of Anansi.
Oh.
Mostly because, well, specifically exactly because of the American Gods TV show.
There you go.
So Anansi is a spider. He is the god of knowledge of stories. Not of knowledge in general, but of knowledge of stories. In fact, he had to trick the creator god into giving up his stories.
Wow.
Yeah. So trickery is super important here. He is super important in West African folklore, but also all across the Caribbean and anywhere you have people who are transferred around the world because of the slave trade from West Africa. So Jamaica is where you get some really great stories too.
Oh, nice.
One of the stories I want to tell a little bit later on comes from a Jamaican tradition. So he's known for his cunning and wit, just like all the other trickster gods, because he can always outsmart his opponents every time, even when it's the creator god. Not even Loki can trick everybody. Thor always saw right through him. Well, almost. And they actually have, well, they're called spider tails. None of this fairy tale nonsense.
Just,
Spider tails.
his thunder doesn't like spiders.
Well, it'll be great.
Okay.
And outsmarting his opponents is always the climax of these stories. And the moral of most spider tales is generally don't mess with weaker people. They're probably smarter than you are.
I like that as a kid who was smart and not particularly strong.
Right? Also, worrying about spiders being tricky. Really good reason to stay away from what is definitely a wide variety of very dangerous venomous spiders in Africa.
Smart. Yeah, that's true. To be able to be like, that's Anansi.
Right?
Don't mess with him.
Right.
Yeah.
He's also very greedy, not terribly considerate, all kinds of fun stuff. There is some lore that tells of Anansi getting temporary powers from other gods. So as much as we say you don't generally pray to trickster gods, Anansi is one of the exceptions that sometimes you might. You could pray to Anansi for rain or some sort of blessing instead of asking other gods, even though it's not specifically encouraged. My inclination is to say that people started praying to him and then validated the practice by saying, well, yeah, he got temporary powers from other god that had been forgotten in the moment of need. But that's just my instinct. It's super hard to prove any of that because that's ancient history. But overall, his divine status not really thought of as terribly important. Kwesi Yanka, one of the great scholars on the subject, says that it's way more important that he has a connection to the Akan people through their folk stories rather than through any claim to divinity.
And I was going to add that much like Sun Wukong, Anansi appears in like a lot of popular culture. You can find kid storybooks on him. Like to this day, I'm sure he's a feature on television and kids' movies as well as.
Yeah, I feel like Neil Gaiman has helped a lot in that. But of course, we can't give all credit to a white guy who's not from Africa. He's not the only one writing. He's just the one that makes white people aware, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely found kids' books that told Anansi stories.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right.
A longer story. A longer story than mine. But
so I paraphrase this to make this shorter, too.
Okay. Well,
So
I'm ready.
We're doing what we can. One day, Anansi was hungry and couldn't find anything to eat. He grabbed a basket and a pot and went to the sea to go fishing. The spider made a fire for his pot and shouted toward the sea, "Hey, big fish, come here." Big fish came, and he caught some of them, putting them in his basket. Next, Anansi shouted, "Big fish, go, make little fish come," scaring the big fish away. Smaller fish came, and he caught them too, putting them in his pot. Anansi spared no time cooking all of the fish he'd caught in his pot and started eating them. When he was full, Anansi picked up his things and headed back towards his home, hiding his empty pot in a bush along the way. On his way home, Anansi met Tiger, and he was frightened because Tiger was very intimidating. Because, tigers be intimidating.
Tiger versus spider. Yep.
Yeah. And Anansi didn't hide because we're not talking a spider the size of a dime. This is a spider that can't hide from a tiger.
Like an Aragog.
I mean, I think a spider would be afraid of an Aragog. I mean, a tiger would be afraid of an Aragog.
Fair. Okay, so a little smaller, like one of Aragog's.
Somewhere in between.
Yeah.
Kind of like Jesus is somewhere between the size of a baby and a temple.
Join our Discord for that reference.
Yeah. Anyway, Tiger demanded to know what Anansi had in his basket. Anansi told Tiger that his basket was empty. So Tiger let the spider go about his way. But he was suspicious of Anansi, because you should always be suspicious of Anansi. So he decided to spy on the spider. Tiger watched as Anansi sat near a tree and opened his basket with all the fish that he had caught earlier. Then Anansi emptied his basket of the fish and gloated over them, counting them out, naming them, real happy with himself. Then Tiger jumped out of his hiding spot and confronted Anansi about his obvious lie. Anansi made an excuse that he'd gone to take a bath after they had met, and that he'd caught some fish while he was bathing. Tiger said, "No, that's not what happened," and demanded that Anansi gave him all of the fish that he'd caught. And the spider obeyed. Tiger ate all of Anansi's fish, and left only the bones for Anansi to eat, who took them up reluctantly and ate those instead. So at least he got something. Anansi complained under his breath that all of his hard work had gone to waste, and he decided to spy on Tiger, looking for some opportunity to trick him. The two continued down the road and saw a fruit tree. Knowing Tiger was greedy, Anansi pointed out that there was beautiful and delicious fruit in the tree. Tiger ordered Anansi to climb the tree and get some of the fruit, and Anansi obeyed. Anansi reached the top of the fruit tree and noticed that Tiger was standing directly beneath him. The spider warned Tiger that he could see lice in his hair. Tiger fell for Anansi's trick and demanded that Anansi catch the lice for him, but Anansi told Tiger that he needed him to lean against the tree first, presumably so that he wouldn't have to jump, but just climb down. Who knows? The tiger agreed, and Anansi came down, pretending to search for the lice that he had claimed to have seen. Because of how long it took, Tiger fell asleep while Anansi climbed through his hair, and the spider wasted no time tying Tiger's hair to the bark of the fruit tree. When he finished the task, Anansi woke Tiger and told him that he couldn't find any other lice in his hair.
Very thorough.
Right. I mean, for all the time it took, it would have seemed thorough. Anyway, Tiger demanded that Anansi capture them all and not give up, but Anansi refused to help him. Tiger tried to attack Anansi in anger because he was stuck. Tiger realized that what he had really done was tie him while he was asleep. So he ordered Anansi to untie his hair, but Anansi refused, and he taunted Tiger, bragging that he'd tied him like a hog. Anansi was no longer afraid of Tiger, and he left him there while he returned home. Tiger's luck got worse. A hunter came and saw the tiger tied to the fruit tree and killed him.
Wow. I don't know who to feel bad for in this story.
Well, the tiger was the antagonist, and the spider was a bit of a dick, but only to exact his cruel form of justice. So neither of them are the good guy, but there is a moral to the story of don't screw around with the little guy because he might be smarter than you.
I think we need to bring Eshu in to determine who's at fault here.
Right? Little justice measured in not just Anansi's style.
Right. There's definitely two sides to this story, and both of them are dicks.
Right.
Terrible. But a nice story. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Nice story.
It's a fun story.
Fun story. Thank you. That's a better adjective.
Trickster gods are all kinds of fun. And if this inspired you for Halloween, cool.
Oh, yeah. Dress up as Anansi.
Right? Dress as spiders. No one will get freaked out at all.
Be an obscure deity for Halloween.
Right? All kinds of fun to be had. Don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick.
There's all kinds of morals that these trickster gods leave us with. But mostly, just don't be a dick is really what you can boil it down to, which, we've been saying that for years.
Yeah, years now. Is this? Oh, we had 52. We're well past our 2nd year anniversary.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
We started in October of 2020 as releasing these anyway.
Yeah. Nice.
Right?
If you want this podcast to go for another 2 years.
Or longer,
please. There are some things you can do to help.
Yeah, you can help by buying our merch from our merch store. You can subscribe on Patreon, get all kinds of exclusive content.
Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
That goes a long way. We love that. We've also got Facebook and Instagram where you can learn more throughout the week as we post little things that you might not know about ancient mythology or the world of religious studies in general.
All of the links are in the show notes, so check it out, and thank you for listening. Peace be with you.
By the late Middle Ages, the Christian prophecy had fulfilled itself.
God is near.